So the constitutional law, let's go back to the Constitution, surrounded a few phrases. Back to the Constitution. So the New Deal, again, we're still rooting our focus here in Article 1, Section 8. The New Deal wanted to create new entitlements. And of course, the most famous entitlement is Social Security, which was established in 1935. The Social Security Act also established the unemployment compensation entitlement, which is a collection of federal and state authority. AFDC, Aid to Families with Dependent Children, which is now called TANF, which is the original welfare program, was also established in 1935. In addition, so most of that comes here. The Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises, to pay the debts and provide the common defense and general welfare of the United States. 2 clauses down, to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states and with the Indian tribes. So let's get back to the child working in the factory. Is there anything interstate commerce about that transaction? And if there is, Congress can regulate it. So here's an example. In 1918, in a famous Supreme Court case called Hammer versus Dagenhart, the Supreme Court said the act of a child working is not an interstate commerce question, because this is a manufacturing question, it's not a commerce question. During the New Deal, once the court flipped, they saw the exact same action with no changes to the Constitution as an interstate commerce question. Why?
Products.
The products are moving in interstate commerce. So do you see how the same activity and the same Constitution is going to be seen in a different way? What explains that new way? Right. People decided that it was going to be something they wanted to support, and they're going to work backwards and find the constitutional reasoning. Now, move ahead a little bit on the Commerce Clause, and you might not realize this. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, which bans racial and other types of discrimination in privately owned public accommodations. What do I mean by that? What's a privately owned public accommodations? I don't mean schools or transportation, I mean restaurants.
Restaurant, bathroom.
Right. Hotels, stadiums. The 1964 Civil Rights Act said that you as a private owner cannot discriminate. And they didn't use the 14th Amendment that Brown used. They used the Commerce Clause. So this was not the only time in the 20th century where the Commerce Clause is stretched. Now, obviously, most people would sympathize with the desire to prevent discrimination on the basis of race in private accommodations. But can you imagine from the eyes of the racist restaurant owner? You're telling me what? Based on this? What's interstate commerce about my restaurant, my barbecue shack? There's actually a barbecue shack Supreme Court case. Ollie's Barbecue. What's interstate commerce about my barbecue shack? Well, is there an answer? You've got to look around sometimes.
Where'd you get the beef?
Where's the beef from? Where are your chairs from? Oh, you own a movie theater? Where'd your movie come from? You own a sports arena? Where'd your team come from? Are you in a gas station near a highway? Where did your customers come from? What do you think? That's the same Commerce Clause. So this is very serious, how Congress starts to interpret the same words differently. But let's get back to Social Security. So this is a program that is considered quite sacred, of course. And here I found on the Social Security website a very interesting little history of Social Security. So this is something where I think the government, even though it's a very primitive looking website by website standards, it's about 13 years old. But this website shows the history of Social Security, saying that parts of the act were barely held constitutional under the General Welfare Clause, and that the people who wrote it, so Justice Cardozo was in the majority, but it was not a unanimous decision. So you can also read the dissent. The dissent is going to be the constitutional majority of just a few years ago, at at this time. So why do we think the Supreme Court in the healthcare case this past summer is solving anything? It isn't, for a lot of reasons. One, the Constitution is up for grabs. Two, elections are held for a reason. Do elections provide that final flavor? Yes. So between the creation of the Social Security Act and this 1937 opinion was an election. It was the election of 1936. What would Roosevelt Brutus's debate look like? What did you do to the Constitution? You made it local. Why? Why did you do that? How did you do that? What's Roosevelt's response?
It's the interest of the nation.
Right. According to whom? According to the constitutional text, read by a robot, or according to majorities who are nominating and electing somebody whose philosophy of government is clear? He's getting a nomination. This is Madison Square Garden, 1936. He's been president for 4 years. He's running on a record. He's explaining his vision. Who's the next step constitutional interpreter? The voters. So, does that mean Roosevelt is above criticism? Is he inventing big government, in other words? I think it's important for us to see that our conflicts today are actually not as important as other conflicts we've had. If you think about the major moments of the United States history, they are the founding, the Civil War, and the New Deal. Are we in one of those moments today? Does this election matter that much that the world is going to be remade next year? See, some people say yes and some people say no. Why yes? Why no? The problem here is that maybe our agreement on fundamental issues is going to overwhelm our differences. And no matter what the candidates and the parties say, we've gotten used to big government, and that's what I'm trying to say about the 20th century. Are we really planning on going back? Have you ever heard somebody ask the president this year, or this was originally a Ronald Reagan line in 1980, are you better off today than you were 4 years ago? Mm-hmm. What if the question was, are you better off today than you were 100 years ago? Because are we used to big government in this way? Are we really going to go back? When you go to Kroger, the food you eat, the pills you take, the public school system, that's not going to be there? I mean, how far back are we going to strip of government? That's not to say that it isn't wrong constitutionally, but I'm saying the political reality is here. This might not be that consequential an election. If we think about the things about real government choice, there were times when we had a real choice about changing the government completely from top to bottom. I'm not saying I would agree or disagree with either of the candidates. I think next year is going to look a lot like this year. And the reason is we have all actually managed to leap together in the constitutional interpretation, which means that our similarities might actually overwhelm our differences. And even if we have differences, we've had peaceful resolution. So how do you teach this to your students? I have no idea. Good luck. But one thing I can tell you is that for an elementary school student, 2 + 2 is 4. The Constitution does not have a similar equation. And the founders believed in us, that we could fill in the blanks and do it in a manner that was predictable and peaceful and respectful, even when you're the loser.